last week the world was greeted with this headline. 6 New Zealand academics also introduced us to a 7th century sailor and navigator who, if their claims are true, undertook the greatest maritime exploration journey of all time. Hui Rangiora, a Cook Islander that led a small flotilla of double-hulled canoes from his homeland to Antarctica and return. 600 years before Maoris settled in New Zealand, 1,000 years before Bellinghausen and Lasvarav in 1821. The first question that went through my mind when I saw that headline, and perhaps yours as well, was, is a journey like this even possible? Let us examine that proposition. At exactly the time Hui Rangiora was on the seas in the South Pacific, the Norse were doing their own thing up north. Hide your wives and daughters. The journeys of Leif Erikson and Eric the Red are the thing of legends. Yet they were only at sea for a maximum of 10 days, preferred hugging the coast where they could, so they could provision, stay out of the rough seas. Moreover, we know fairly closely the dates and details of their explorations. There is both written and archaeological evidence in abundance. Your village gets trashed, and you are likely to jot it down somewhere. This gives us a good baseline as to what is possible in terms of sea travel at that time in comparable waters. Contemporary expeditions have been undertaken to prove travel, with it human migration, across the Pacific was possible 1,000 years ago. The most famous of these was Thor Heyerdahl's first Kentucky expedition in 1947. They were at sea for 101 days and travelled 7,000 kilometres. The longest and lesser known journey took place in 1973. It was called Las Balsas, after the wood used to build the 3-raft armada. The 12 men were at sea for 179 days, all the way from Ecuador to Australia, a journey of some 14,000 kilometres. Despite having rice, beans and preservatives to supplement their diet of fish, plus a gas cooker, the crew's biggest issue was hunger. Second on the list was infighting. Both Kentucky and Las Balsas had one major factor in their favour: the ocean currents. Quickly acquaint yourself how this works in the South Pacific, because we will be coming back to that map shortly. We now know prodigious travel across the Pacific was possible and did occur. Genetic studies help us understand these migrations even more. So could a well-equipped flotilla journey from the Cook Islands to the South Pole and return occur as stated in the research? The short answer to that is no. This is why. Look at the map. A straight line between the islands and landfall is 7,500 kilometres. In sailing terms, you might be talking 9,000 kilometres. All you would have to eat is the food you took, like sweet potatoes, taro, etc. Essentially after that you'll be living on fish after, say, 2 weeks at sea. You're going to leave your homeland, which averages 25 degrees a day, and go to a place which averages minus 18 without adequate clothing. Then there is this.
Kind of broke out, eh?
The one behind it didn't.
Behind it.
Oh
scared then.
Oh, it's so good.
The gun just got
Exhaust temperature, outlets.
Oh.
Pipework. Turn off the window, walk so you don't safeguard, tube, break down tube, break down tube, break down tube.
As we go. Here we go. This one? Yeah.
Oh, the water! Shit!
I'm just going there.
And that footage, by the way, was shot on board a New Zealand Navy vessel. Plus, you're also going to have to contend with this. Your journey south would be entirely against the deep sea currents. How long a journey of this distance would take in such vessels is open to conjecture. The winds and weather would play a major role for starters. A seagoing waka could travel 150 kilometres a day, which is double the speed of those contemporary expeditions. If we then divide 9,000 by 150, we get 60 days, and that's one way. Getting back would be noticeably shorter, a rough landlubber estimated total journey time of 90 days, with no islands in between to restock and wearing totally inadequate clothing. The Vikings were at least acclimatised to the rigours and dressed for the occasion. The report in question also stated that when Hui Rangiora did arrive at the frozen continent with his team at the bottom of the world, he and his crew, by now presumably starving, cold and exhausted, didn't bother to go onto the shore. They didn't look at those plump penguins and nesting seabirds as a source of energy, nor did they make any mention of these strange new creatures. Just snow and cold waters. And they got the postcard and left. It doesn't sound plausible to me. Still, the opportunity to stun the world, possibly rewrite history, would simply be to replicate the journey in question. Prove the greatest maritime exploration journey of all time was at least feasible. Do a Kentucky or Las Balsas. That would be all the proof I would need to say I was wrong in my appraisal. That appraisal is, it wasn't survivable. And it took till 1821 to become so. Briefly interrupting this one for 15 seconds or so, if the South Pole and a dose of scepticism is your thing, check out this one on your screen, link in the description. Onwards. There is a much better explanation as to what Rangiora was talking about in one of his oceanic encounters.
Icebergs floating off the New Zealand coast are attracting hundreds of spectators to the region. Air tour operators have struck a small bonanza as scores of tourists and the curious pay to fly over a flotilla of icebergs floating near the coast. It's rare for whole icebergs to drift so far north before melting, but a cold snap around southern New Zealand and favorable ocean currents have brought the towering visitors to the region intact. On Friday, a passenger on a helicopter ride captured a rare moment on camera. A large chunk of an iceberg broke off, exposing the normally hidden underside of the iceberg as it rose to the surface. 2 helicopter companies and several small planes on New Zealand's South Island are making as many as 6 trips a day to the floating ice blocks. The icebergs first appeared off the coast nearly 2 weeks ago after drifting north from the frozen continent. Last year, icebergs were seen in New Zealand waters for the first time in 56 years.
When icebergs break off at the South Pole, they can literally be the size of a large city. So big, the majority bed themselves to the bottom of the ocean floor and go nowhere, creating massive iceberg graveyards. The southern icebergs dwarf those in the north. With the current we've touched on, they can travel 350 kilometres in a week. Peter out around the Auckland Islands, but now and again they can make it to the 42nd parallel. That video you saw was from 2006, when 200 large icebergs sailed merrily northwards past the east coasts of Southland and Otago. A familiar size flotilla was spotted off the coast of the South Island in 1931. They turn up off the coasts of Tasmania, South Chile and Argentina as well. The world's largest rogue iceberg almost collided with South Georgia in the Falklands in 2020. That berg was the same size as the island. It's entirely feasible and likely Polynesian sailors encountered an iceberg flotilla now and again. They are well within their range. This is Hui Rangiora's narrative on what he saw, which is the primary source of the academic's bold assertions. Take 30 seconds to read it. Now ask yourself the question, if you were the TAB betting agency and you were offering odds, the likelihood he and his tiny fleet travelled safely all the way through the southern oceans to the South Pole and back, unscathed and not even with frostbite or hypothermia, or simply they came across a flotilla of icebergs in much more warmer and kinder northerly waters. I know where my money is going. I'm also comfortable being proven wrong. Happy to donate towards an expedition from the Cooks to McMurdo employing a similar craft to those used at the time. In terms of finding people brave and foolhardy enough to undertake an extreme journey of this nature, even with modern provisioning, clothing and radios, an icebreaker escort, it is only fitting and fair those behind the report get first dibs for a spot. Perhaps they could use this video to entice other members to join. Let me now leave you with the Maori word of the day. That is, inihua. Inihua means insure or insurance. Haere rā everyone, goodbye, thanks for tuning in, mihi mihi.